Happy to be here.
Right, and today we're going to be taking you through exam preparation. It's not going through all the content of the work, but just showing you how you should structure your preparations, your planning for the examinations, and giving you a few guidelines and tips as to how to prepare yourself properly for the examination. So let's jump straight into it, and let's have a look at what we're going to be focusing on today. So in today's session, we're going to look at, firstly, reminding you about what the main topics and the subtopics are. We're going to look at the possible format of the control test that you will have to be doing in 2021. We're going to look at the content that was removed from the exam guidelines. In other words, you would not have been taught this content this term, or this year rather, so we're not going to be examining it this year, but we're going to remind you about what that content is. We're going to remind you about the action verbs and how to use the action verbs when you answer questions to ensure that you're answering the questions properly with the right amount of information and the right strategy that needs to be used when answering those questions. And then we're going to take a look at how to answer section A, B, and C questions. So that's where we're going to come in and give you tips and reminders about the format and remember what verbs to use and so on. So that is what we're going to be looking at in today's session. Okay, so grade 10s, you'll remember that this year there was some content removed from your teaching. You weren't taught everything, and we're going to look at that in a moment after we look at what the topics or main topics are for the year, which means that you're also only going to be writing one assessment this year. So it's not been called an exam for this year. It's going to be one assessment where in the past where you have been writing two in the papers in the past. So we are used to explain to you writing two papers, paper 1, paper 2, but for this year it's just a control test that you are using, or that the teacher are going to be using to assess you. So all 4 topics for business studies will be assessed within that one paper, and we'll have a look at that structure a little bit later. But before we do that, let's just remind you of the content for this year's business studies. So if we can take a look at the content, where we have the main topics and the subtopics. So you'll remember that we have 4 main topics: business environment, business ventures, business roles, and business operations. And then we have subtopics within each of these topics. So under business environments, we have the micro, macro, and the market environment that you were taught. Then we look at the interrelationship that exists between the micro, macro, and market environment. Then you had to look at business sectors and contemporary socio-economic issues. Okay, so all of those subtopics form part of the main topic, business environments. Then within business ventures, we have forms of ownership, business opportunity and related factors, presentation of business information, and the business plan. So those 4 subtopics form part of business ventures. Within business roles, we have social responsibility, creative thinking and problem solving, relationship and team performance. So those 3 subtopics form part of business roles. And under business operations, you would have looked at business functions and the concept of quality. Okay, so as I said before, there are some topics that was removed from the ATP in 2021, which means that due to COVID, we were not all able to be in the classroom, so some topics were removed. And even if some schools were fortunate enough to be able to teach these topics should not be assessed in the last control test that you are writing for this year. Okay, so the entire topics that were removed for grade 10 would be the subtopic of contracts, business locations, entrepreneurial qualities, and self-management. Okay, so these topics were removed entirely, but there were also some subtopics within a topic that was removed, as it was removed in 2020. It remained removed for 2021. So there are also subtopics within contemporary socioeconomic issues, as well as creative thinking and problem solving. So what you need to understand here, grade 10s, is that with these subtopics that were retained as excluded, it does not mean that the entire section on contemporary socioeconomic issues has been removed. It also doesn't mean the entire section of creative thinking and problem solving has been removed. It just means 1 or 2 aspects within that subtopic has been removed. So just to make sure we understand, the top part of the slide where it says topics that were removed from the ATP in 2021, those were entire topics: the contracts, the business locations, and entrepreneurial qualities and self-management. Those entire topics were removed from the ATP, or the teaching plan, for 2021. So those entire topics will not be tested as part of the control test that you will be writing. However, the next section where it says subtopics that were removed or that were retained as excluded, that just means that parts of that topic has been removed from the teaching for this year. So you are still being tested on contemporary socioeconomic issues. However, the section of piracy, which forms part of that contemporary socioeconomic issues, will not be tested as part of this control test. And then within creative thinking and problem solving, so you are still being taught, would have been taught the section of work on creative thinking and problem solving, but this part of the work, or this section of the work within creative thinking and problem solving, will not be examined, as was retained as excluded. And that is the use of indigenous knowledge to solve problems and the use of non-conventional thinking to identify innovative business opportunities. So just those two components of contemporary or creative thinking and problem solving was removed. So make sure you understand that clearly, to make sure that you understand that not the entire topic was removed for contemporary socioeconomic issues and creative thinking and problem solving, but just those few aspects within that topic. Okay,
Mr. de Klerk, I think this is it should be noted that every educator should have received the exam guideline.
Yes.
And if you guys didn't receive the exam guideline, go and ask your teacher to get you a copy of the exam guideline, and you use it as a tick list when you prepare for the examination. So basically what you do is you will see on the right-hand side of that exam guideline, there will be all the different ways that they can ask that question. So it will say explain, discuss, that, and of course that section. So make sure you take a pen and you can use it as a tick list.
Yes.
To say, I know this, I know this, I know this, or I don't have information on this. So that's very important, especially so that you don't prepare for things that are not going to be in the examination.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's why we highlighted that to you, to make sure that you understand what's going to be removed completely and what's going to be, where there are going to be sections that have been partially removed. So make sure you understand that 100% correctly, and make sure with your teachers in the class that they have in fact stuck with those guidelines, because that is what we were all instructed to do. Okay, what we're going to do now is, because I said you're not going to be writing a normal examination where you would have paper 1 and paper 2 with the 4 topics divided within those 2 papers. You're now going to have a control test. So what we're going to do now is just to look at the possible format that your teacher is going to be using when setting this paper. Okay, so let's take a look at the possible format for the control test that will be used now. Okay. So we have, firstly, remember, 1 question paper. Okay, so no longer 2 papers for this year. So this is what we are talking about now applies for 2021. But for this year, you have 1 question paper. It's going to be 2 hours, and it's going to be 150 marks. There will be 3 sections in the paper, as you are used to by now. Section A will be for 30 marks, and it's going to cover all 4 topics. Okay, so business environment, business ventures, business roles, etc. All 4 main topics will be tested in Section A. And it will be tested in multiple choice questions, where you're going to have 5 multiple choice questions, and the value of each multiple choice question is 2 marks. So 5 times 2 marks gives you 10 marks. So the multiple choice will count 10 out of the 30 marks in Section A. Then choose the correct term. There will be 5 terms that you will have to put in the right place, and will be 2 marks each. So again, 5 times 10 is 10 marks. So choosing the correct term for the statement will be worth 10 marks. And then finally, matching the columns, 5 times 2 marks again. So for each of these different types of questions within Section A, the multiple choice, the choosing the correct term, and match the columns, each of those are worth 10 marks. But what's important here, grade 10s, is to know that all the topics are going to be tested. So they're going to look at all the content for the entire year, for this year, and they're going to be taking that content and mixing it up within those questions in Section A. So 30 marks, but all the content will be tested. Okay, let's take a look at Section B. In Section B, this is where they're going to be splitting the questions between the topics. So what's important here is that you must understand that there are going to be 3 questions in this section. You are only going to be required to answer 2 of these questions. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that statement so that we are clear that we only are going to be answering 2 of the 3 questions. So make sure that when you read in the question paper, the instruction should say that there are 3 questions in Section B. You are required to answer 2 of those questions, and you have a choice as to which 2 you are going to be answering. But what's important to remember here, there is content that is linked to question 2, 3, and 4. Okay, So if you look at question 2, that is business environments and business operations. So that is the content that would have normally formed part of paper 1. Okay, so business environments and business operations. So all the content that we showed you earlier that's linked to business environments and business operations can only be tested in question 2. So in question 2, the work that will be tested must come from the main topics of business environments and business operations. Okay, and that will be for 40 marks. Question 3, the work that will be tested in question 3 must come from business roles and business ventures. So that would have been what was tested in paper 2, and that will also be 40 marks. And then the 4th question is going to be miscellaneous. So all 4 topics are going to be covered in this question, and it's very likely there's going to be 10 marks per topic. Okay, so each of the 4 topics will be tested in question 4, business environment, business operations, business roles, and business ventures, and it's very likely it will be 10 marks per question there, making up another 40 marks. So it's important there, grade 10s, that you understand that there are 3 possible questions that you can answer, but you only have to answer 2. If you answer all 3, which you shouldn't be doing, they're going to only mark the first 2 questions. So if you answer question 2, 3, and 4 by mistake, then what you should do is, if you pick it up, cross out the one that you want the teacher not to mark. So the one you don't want the teacher to mark, you cross that out. Otherwise, the teacher has to mark the first 2. Okay, and you might have done better in question 3 and 4, but you're going to be disadvantaged because you answer all 3. So make sure that when you are preparing to write your exam, you read through the question paper in the 10 minutes you are allocated before the exam, or the control test rather in this case, and you make sure that you are picking the 2 that you can score the most marks in. Then finally, grade 10s, in section C, we have 2 questions. So you have options between 2 questions, and you only have to choose one of the 2. And again, it's linked to the topic. So business environments and business operations are linked to question 5. So the essay question must come from either business environments or from business operations for question 5. And for question 6, the content for the question, for the essay question in question 6, must come from business roles or business ventures. Okay, so there you have it, grade 10s. That's the possible format, and I think that's most likely the format that the teachers will be using, but I'm sure if they're using something different, they will discuss that with you as well. So make sure that you are prepared and listen to your teacher instruction, but this is the one that they are very likely to follow. Okay, now when it comes to answering the questions itself, we talk about these action verbs, and this is the instruction that you are given when you are required to answer the question. That you have to look at the action verbs to see how you need to answer those questions. So Mr. Van Sale, would you kindly take us through these action verbs to make sure that, or give the learners the clear understanding of how they should be answering the questions?
Okay. Mr. de Klerk, the action verbs are actually very, very important. That, along with your mark allocation. You will see there's always a mark allocation, and I see in grade 10, learners are not actually used to following the mark allocations, so they don't know how to structure their answers. Now guys, the mark allocation and the verb together will give you an idea how much you need to answer and what the examiner is looking for. Now in the first slide, you guys will see that we have certain verbs that count 1 mark each, but that you normally need to check with the mark allocation as well. And this is the words give, identify, list, mention, name, and state. These are lower order questions, and it's normally just a recall from memory, and that is normally worth 1 mark each. It's not always the case, because there might be things like name or identify that might be worth 2 marks if there's a bit more of an application to it, but therefore you need to follow the mark guideline or the mark allocation for it. Right, in the next slide, we are going to look at things where the marks will be allocated at the end of the sentence. 2 marks, so it requires still a full sentence, but we are only going to look at the essence of that sentence and to see if you have made your point. And these verbs are the following: classify, name, suggest, advise, propose, define, outline, recommend, motivate, and state. Okay, so any one of these, I don't need a statement and a qualifier and all of those things. Just the essence of the sentence. Short sentences, as long as it's full, will sometimes give you your 2 marks. Now, the next one is the more difficult one that you guys need to wrap your head around. And if we can go to that slide, you will see the moment that you get these verbs, you are required to give a statement and then back up that statement, like explaining that statement with a next part of the sentence. So there's going to be a split mark. And this is these verbs: describe, explain, distinguish, discuss, analyze, elaborate, showing an impact, applying a technique, evaluate, differentiate, compare, or tabulate. Guys, these are middle order questions and they require a statement and a qualifier. Now, how do we determine a qualifier? We can use the words, if I can state it like how, or who will benefit, or what will happen, or so that, because,
Why?
and,
Yeah.
all of those things. Why? That will tell you what the qualifier is. I make a statement, why? Because of this and this, and that is your qualifier.
So
Right.
so it's quite important there with those last set of verbs that we've shown. You have to first make your statement and then your qualifier.
And then your qualifier
So
is...
So a trick you can use is you can look at the question, you make your statement, and then ask yourself. So after you've written down the statement, now you know you've got your 1 mark out of the 2, and then you can ask yourself those questions:
Yes,
why,
why,
how,
how.
what, when.
Yeah,
and
we've
all
got
that.
some
So-
examples
so
that
we'll-
we're going to show them
Yeah.
exactly how that works. But it's also very important, guys. I know in grade 10, that jump up from grade 9 to
Yes.
grade 10 can be quite daunting, and this is where it catches you out. Because what sometimes happens here is that you guys are used to writing in little staccato sentences, and then you don't understand because I've studied the work and I know what I've done, and now I only get half of the marks. Now, guys, that's the reason why. It's a more academic way of writing an answer, and you don't be caught out by that, especially in grade 10.
Oh, so there you have it, grade 10s. Just make sure that as part of your preparation, you are also studying your action verbs. So those last 3 slides we showed you with the action verbs, make sure that's part of your studying so that you know when you see it, I need to have either a 1 statement for the 1 mark, or I need to have 1 statement for the 2 marks that are at the end of the sentence, or I need to have a statement and a qualifier. Where I first make the statement and then I ask those questions: why, what, how, and then give a response to that: why, what, and how, to make sure I get the 2 marks when I need to elaborate a little bit further. It's like Mr. Van Zyl says, very tricky in grade 10, but by the time you get to grade 12, you should have been drilled so often that you actually know exactly what to do as soon as you see the question paper. But for now, you need to make sure that those slides are actually part of your study process so that you know, when I see that, this is how I need to answer the question. And then in conjunction with the mark allocation, that should also help you to answer. But like Mr. Van Zyl said, we're going to look at a few examples later on so you can see how the marks are allocated. Okay, back to you, Mr. Van Zyl.
Right. Now, guys, the next thing that we are going to look at is how to tackle Section A questions. Now, you have seen earlier from Mr. de Klerk, he showed you that Section A, that is now match the columns and fill in the missing word, and the other one is multiple choice. Now, guys, those questions count 30 out of the 150 marks, and it's supposed to be lower order things. And I oftentimes see that learners lose a lot of marks because they go through that way too quickly and they take the first obvious thing that comes to mind, and that oftentimes costs you a lot of marks because each answer is worth 2 marks. So guys, don't be caught out. This is the place where you want to score a lot of marks, and there are ways that you can analyze these questions properly before you actually attempt to answer, because it's sometimes not that easy as what you might think. So we are going to show you how to do Section A. Right, now guys, in Section A, it is very important that you answer all the questions. If you don't answer all the questions, that's 2 marks that you leave out. Then if you think about a question like multiple choice gives you 4 options. If I don't know the answer, then guess, pick one of the 4, because you've got 1 in 4 chance of being correct. So please never ever leave anything out in this section. Make sure you answer every single question. Right, so if we can go to the slide, I can quickly take you through it. Make sure you answer all the questions in Section A. There's no choice questions, and make sure there's no blanks. Number your answers clearly and correctly. Now, guys, I cannot state this more than enough, because sometimes what happens is you don't have the right number next to the answer, and because the marker marks in sequence, your sequence is out of whack, and then you might lose not just the mark that you have incorrectly numbered, but everything after that as well. So please make sure that you number clearly and correctly. Don't mess up the numbering here, because that means you will lose out on easy marks. Right, if we go back to the slide, only write the letter or word down, no sentences. Guys, they don't ask you to write down the word next to A, B, C, or D. Just A, just B, just C, nothing else, because it is very, very annoying for a marker to go back to the question paper to go and see what sentence did he write down and what number, what letter is that. So please don't do that. Remember, you are writing an exam paper for the marker. You want to make it as easy for the marker to give you marks. There shouldn't be any guesswork in it. So make sure you make it as easy for the marker to spot your marks. Right, back to the slide. We can see there, if you don't know the answer, you never leave a blank, you guess. Only write down one answer for each question. Now guys, this is very important. In grade 10, I've seen it oftentimes that a learner cannot choose between two. It's either D or it's A, and he is not certain. So he says, no, it's D or /A. Now guys, the marker doesn't mark the first one or the second one or whatever. If you put two answers down, he's going to immediately mark it wrong. Even if one of those answers were correct, you must choose one. You cannot have a double answer there at all. Make sure you understand that well. Right, and then the next one, do not write in the left and right hand margins. Guys, that is where we write down the marks, and that makes it easier for us to count the marks up correctly. So leave those spaces blank. Right, we are also going to show you strategies how to deal with difficult or with these questions. Now, the first one that we are going to do is multiple choice. Right, now guys, as some tips that I'm going to go through with you, try to work out the answer without looking at the possibilities first. If you know the answer in your head and you can find it in the possibility, then you know that you are right. Read through the statements and all the options very well. Underline the words in the statement. I'm going to have an example that I will show you how to do that. You cross out the options that are definitely wrong. In multiple choice, there will always be options that are definitely wrong and two that are very similar. That makes it a bit more tricky. You read through the statement again and select the most appropriate answer. Now guys, the word is appropriate. There might be two answers there that might look correct, but it is not. So you need to choose the most appropriate one. Write down your answer and move to the next question. Guys, do not top too long on one question, because you're going to make yourself confused and you're going to cross out correct answers and substitute it for incorrect ones. Once you've put your answer down, move on. Go back to the question you were not sure of at the end of the paper. Now guys, I know this is there, and for some people it might work, but I can tell you, for me, I have very often times when I've done this, go back to a paper and then change answers that were definitely actually correct to wrong answers, because now I'm starting to overthink it. Once you've done it, leave it. It is done, unless you know for certain that your answer was incorrect.
Also there, a good tip is to make sure that when you're answering, if there are blanks, don't spend a lot of time on it. Move on to the next and then come back to it, because often you'll forget some facts. When you see a question, the facts just pop out of your head.
That's correct.
Then just move on to something else, and when you're more comfortable, those facts will come back to you, and then you can go back to it. Don't spend 10, 15 minutes. I see lots of grade 10s, especially it's their first time writing an end-of-year paper, and it's more serious, more pressure on you. You tend to get a bit panicky and stressed, get some anxiety, and then you spend 10, 15 minutes thinking about one multiple choice question worth 2 marks.
Yeah, why do you do that?
In the end of the exam, you can't finish your essay because now you've run out of time. So when you get to a situation where you go a bit blank and you can't think of the answer right now, just move on. It will come back to you, and then at the end come back to it. So at least you know you've answered. You had a chance to see all the questions and answer everything you know.
Yes.
Instead of losing extra time, and especially happens in grade 10 because it's very different from the grade 8 and 9 examinations.
That's true. Okay, guys, I'm going to move on. There's an example question there for you, and you will see what I mean by the previous tips that we've given you. There's a scenario that says Tyro manufacturers operate in the blank. That's the one that you need to choose. The what business sector, as they specialize in the production of winter jackets. Now, Mr. de Klerk, if you can just do the first animation there. Now, guys, you see, the first thing that we are going to do is underline the key words here. And I've underlined production there. So we know that that is going to be key in determining the answer. So everything that's got to do with production, now I can cross out the ones that are definitely not right. Primary sector, we know, is about taking stuff from nature. So we cross out primary sector, we cross out formal sector because that has got to do with government and non-government things and
registered businesses.
Yeah, that's registered businesses. So that is definitely not there. So now it leaves us between secondary and tertiary, and now I can figure out the one is production. Tertiary doesn't produce, they deliver services, so I now definitely know that the answer is B, which is secondary. So what I've done is I've analyzed this question well before I just jumped into a conclusion and might select the wrong answer.
And that's the strategy you follow when you don't necessarily know the answer and you have to try and work it out.
And try and work
Obviously,
it out by process of elimination.
The best way is if you read it and you know the answer, you just go look for your answer.
Absolutely. Okay. Right. Now, okay, guys, the next one, and these kind of things will work for match the columns as well. So you can use the same strategy. The first one says read through the 5 statements and all the options first. Then, just as in multiple choice, you underline the key words in the statement. You look at the 10 concepts. There's always 10 concepts. 2 of the concepts will be from the same topic, right? So you look at the 10 concepts or the terms given, you look for the matching concepts that comes from the same topic, and then you match them with the statement. Now I've got an example question there. You can see there are 10 specific words or concepts at the top there, and then there are 5 questions. Now once again, the first one says A, what is a form of protest by a group of people about lack of service delivery. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to underline a part of that sentence. Now you can see that I've underlined a form of protest. So now I'm going to look for the 2 words in the top that speak about protests. So there it is. Violence and political disturbances, both of those refer to a form of a protest. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I now need to choose between the 2, so I'm going to again underline another part of the sentence, and it's about lack of service delivery. So we now know that it's got nothing to do with violence, but it is more than a political disturbance, and that is what we're going to choose. Right, Mr. de Klerk, you can just, there we go. So we've chosen the political disturbance there. Right, the next sentence says, lower level management implements what decisions to carry out instructions from top management. So once again, we're going to underline, we are speaking about management, and now we need to go and choose 2 words that's got to do with management, and I've got tactical and operational there. So now I'm going to underline another part of the sentence that says decisions. So what kind of decisions do they make, tactical or operational? Now guys, we now know that it is top management, it is lower level management, and we know that they are operational. Right, now guys, we do the same with all the other ones. State-owned businesses are part of what sector? So I'm looking at 2 words that refer to sector, and now you know it's private and public, and I just need to choose the right one. Right, the next one the same. I've underlined formed by workers, so now I know anything that's got to do with workers, and that's a trade union or a workplace forum, but I'm looking at protection of rights, so now we know that it is a trade union. And Mr. de Klerk, if you can just quickly scroll down the last one, and they can see exactly what we mean by that. Right, so guys, that is, you can use the same kind of strategy if you would do a match the columns kind of question. So guys, that's section A. Make sure you answer it correctly. Make sure you spend enough time so that you get the maximum marks there. These are normally not very difficult questions to do. Now guys, in section B, I'm going to hand you over to Mr. de Klerk.
Right, section B, and remember here grade 10s, there are going to be 3 questions that you can choose from. And remember, there's a choice, it's optional, either question 2, question 3, or question 4. You have to do 2 of those. You can choose between the 3 questions that are asked to you, but you have to do 2 of them. Remember, do not answer all 3, otherwise the marker is going to pick the or mark the first 2. They'll mark question 2 and 3, and they'll just draw a line through question 4. Okay, so if by accident you do it, just rule a line through the ones you don't want the marker to mark. Okay, so let's take a look at the tips that you need to look at when answering section B questions. So the first one, section B will consist of 3 questions. You have to answer only 2. Right? I'm highlighting this a lot today, but it is the first time that you're writing a paper like this, so it's going to be a paper where you have to make sure you understand the instructions carefully. Okay, then take a look at the action verb. So what we've shown you earlier, the 3 sets of action verbs that you have to look at to see how you are going to be answering the questions. Is it going to be a 1-mark answer where you only have to make that statement or 1 mark? Is it going to be a statement for 2 marks at the end, or is it going to be an answer that requires a statement as well as a qualifier? Okay, then let the mark allocation guide you, and I'm going to show you as I go through the questions a little bit later how you should let the mark allocation guide you in terms of answering the questions. Use bullet points. Also, look out for questions that have specified number of facts. So this is, for example, they'll say name 2 things or mention 3 things, because you're only allowed to mention 2 or 3 things depending on the question. You can't answer more than what is asked for in the question. And I'll go through that with you in an example a bit later as well. Use bullet points to separate the facts from your answer, and that is purely for the marker, to make sure that the marker knows where your one statement has ended and the next one has started, so that they make sure that they read through all your answers. If you just answer everything in 1 paragraph, if the marker is marking a long time, they might skip over because they might be a bit tired. But when you have bullet points, it's very easy to identify when you've finished your one statement and when the next statement has begun. You can look at the slide and you can see we've got bullet points here, so you know exactly when we're going to move on to the next one. But if it was just 1 big paragraph, it becomes a bit more tricky to read, and we might lose information, so you might lose marks. Remember, Mr. Van Zyl said earlier, when you're answering the question paper, the format you use is there to help the marker, but you're helping the marker to get you the maximum marks. You're actually helping yourself by following that strategy. Right, then let's look at the next tip. You have to, or when asked to quote, the quotes have to be directly from the statement or the scenario given to you. So use the actual sentences that have been given to you, and I'll show you that in an example as well. And then draw tables when you're asked to differentiate between 2 or 3 concepts, because that again clearly tells the marker which concept you are addressing. Okay, and then lastly, all answers have to be in full sentences unless it is required to give just one thing or name something or just list something. So that's going to be guided by the question, but generally you have to give full statements, and this is where the grade 10s tend to struggle. As Mr. Van Zyl said, it's just not just 1-word answers and you think I've answered so I should get the marks. It's actually statements that you have to make at this stage. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples. So in this example we have here, it says state any 4 components of the microenvironment, and look at the mark allocation. It's 4. So you have to mention 4 components for 4 marks. So each component you mention is going to be worth 1 mark. Okay, so this is that lower order question. So you only have to state the component. You don't have to explain anything. It doesn't have to be a long sentence. You're only going to mention that component. But let's take a look at this and see if this is what you have done. And you've given 6 answers here. the marker may not mark past the fourth one. So what they'll do is they'll draw a line past the fourth answer. Okay? So what a lot of grade 10s tend to do is they think, I know more answers, so I'm going to put more down. Okay? When the question tells you specifically how many facts you have to mention, you can only mention those many facts. So if it says state 4 components, you can only state 4 components. If you state 5, 6, 7, 8 components, then they're only going to look at the first 4 and mark those first 4. They'll draw a line as you see on the slide, and they won't even consider that, which means that you might potentially have something wrong in the first 4, and then you have correct answers past the 4th bullet point that has now been crossed out, so you're disadvantaging yourself. So do not answer more than what the question requires. If they state a specific amount of facts that need to be mentioned in your answer, that is what you stick to. You don't do more than that, and then you only put the ones you know are correct. Okay? You put those first to make sure that you have the 4 correct answers that they are looking for. And there you see the mark allocation, 1 mark per fact. Okay? When the question says discuss 2 factors that will influence your choice of funding. Okay? So you look at the mark allocation here, it is 6 marks. So you are asked to speak about 2 factors in this question. So each factor is going to be worth 3 marks. Now if you look at the way the mark allocation is done, it's going to be 2 marks for naming the factor and 1 mark for explaining the factor. Okay, so if you look at the first one, nature of finance, that is naming the factor of funding or choosing funding. Nature of finance, so you get 2 marks for that, and then 1 mark for any one of the 2 bullet points. So again, you're only going to write 1 statement after you have named the factor. And the same thing for the second factor. The amount of capital needed is the second factor that you are mentioning, and then 1 description or 1 explanation for the amount of capital needed. So you can write for large amounts of capital, the best source of funding would be debentures, share capital, and long-term loans, or for small amounts of capital, the best source of funding would be short-term loans and bank overdrafts. One of those 2 would be sufficient. So when you are looking at a question like this, where you ask to discuss 2 factors or name and explain 2 factors, whenever you have to name the item, it's going to be 2 marks for naming and 1 mark for the explanation part. But let the mark allocation guide you. So for example, if this was an 8-mark question, you would have had 2 marks for saying the nature of finance, and then you would have had to have they would have then allocated 2 marks for the statement after that, or you would have to put 2 answers there for that. Okay, but for the name and explain, it's generally going to be 2 marks for the naming of it and 1 mark for the explanation of it.
Mr. de Klerk, I also just want to mention here, you can see the question says again, discuss 2. That is why those 2s are in capitals, because if you would have written a paragraph now that we just told you is not a good idea, you could have 4 in there. The first 2 was incorrect in the paragraph, and the marker will then go and look at that paragraph and say, no, wrong, that's 2 factors. The rest of the entire paragraph would have been disregarded because the first 2 has been mentioned already.
Right, so there you go. Write your subheading and bullet points just to clear it up for the marker. But again, when they ask for 2 factors like they did here, do not give 3 or 4 factors. You end up wasting your time because the marker may not mark more than that. Okay, they're going to look at the first 2 items, and then that will be all they will be marking. The rest, they just simply draw a line through, and you have just wasted valuable time that you might need in the examination.
Maybe it's worth mentioning, Mr. de Klerk, part of the journey of being in academics, and this is basically what it is the ability to analyze instructions as well, because this is also what we are testing, not just the content, but can you follow an instruction? And the instructions are very clear, and therefore you will not get credited for not following the instructions.
Right, let's take a look at one more or another type of question. And this question has 3 parts to it. So it has a leading statement there where it says fashion designers employ fashion designers who are always late for work despite several warnings. The government has increased import tariffs, making it difficult for VFD to continue importing designer clothing from China. And then VFD purchased their raw materials from Bogo clothing manufacturers that are always out of stock. And there are 3 parts to this question. It says, quote, 3 challenges faced by VFD from the scenario, And take a look there, the word quote has been highlighted there, and we said earlier, whenever they say quote, you have to take from the statement, and it's going to be worth 3 marks, and they're asking for 3 challenges that need to be quoted. So each quote, each piece of information you take from the scenario is only going to be 1 word. Now here's a guideline or a tip that you can use. When you look at that statement, there are only 3 sentences there, which means that each of those 3 statements or sentences has to be a challenge. So when you are putting your answers on your script, you can actually write that sentence down verbatim. As you see it, write the entire sentence down. Okay, so when you see a question like this, look at the number of questions in the actual paragraph or scenario that you are given. Often if they're going to ask for 3 things, there'll be 3 statements or 3 sentences in the paragraph. It's not always going to be like that, especially at grade 10 and 11. There might be a few more sentences there, but when you are asked to quote from the sentence, write down the whole statement or write down the entire sentence, because you don't know which part of the sentence necessarily they are looking for. If you write down the whole sentence, you are guaranteed to get that 1 mark because you are quoting from the statement. You are taking directly from the statement. That's only 1 mark, so it should be 1 easy mark to get.
Mr. de Klerk, I've oftentimes seen, especially with grade 10s, that they put that sentence in their own words.
Yes.
They write
They rephrase
something.
it, yeah.
The moment that you do that, guys, it's no longer a quote, and therefore again you're not following instruction, and because you're not following instruction, you cannot be accredited with the mark.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's very important that you follow. You don't need quotation marks. This is not an English paper. This is business studies. So no quotation marks, but it must be verbatim. You cannot use your own words.
Yeah. Okay, and it's easy marks to get because it's right there for you. 3 sentences, they're looking for 3 statements or 3 challenges. So there you go. Just take it, write down the 3 sentences as you see it, and you'll get those 3 marks. All right, question 2 is now going to be the application part or the theory part where you're going to actually have to apply the knowledge there. So it says classify each challenge according to the 3 business environments, and that's going to be 6 marks. So here you have to state whether it's going to be part of the macro, micro, or the market environment. So you're applying knowledge there, and therefore each environment that you attach to those quotes will be worth 2 marks. Okay, but they must that environment that you have chosen, micro, macro, market, must actually be related to that quote. If you match the wrong quote with the environment, you're not going to get the marks for classifying the 3 business environments. So a lot of people think just because they see the words 3 business environments, now I can just name them in any order. They have to be linked to the quote. If you don't link it to the quote, you are only going to get marks for the quote and nothing further, because the information needs to correspond and link to each other to show that you understand how they are related to each other. And then the last one, state the extent of control that the VFD has in each of the business environments. And again, I'm going to look through the answers with you, and I'll show you how they need to be linked. So there you can see the challenges. We've taken the 3 sentences from the scenario as is. Right? The first sentence is linked to the micro environment, and we have full control in the micro environment. So that full control, or the level of control, needs to be linked to the environment that you have mentioned, and that environment needs to be linked to the challenge that you have mentioned there. So there is a little bit of skill involved here. You can't just write the answers down in any order. They need to be linked to each other to get the marks. If you do mix it up, you're probably only going to get the marks for the challenge and nothing further than that, unless you get lucky by saying full or no control, limited control or something. Okay, so when you answer this question, make sure that you've got, or see how they want you to answer as well. They often ask you to redraw a table. They'll give you an example of a table and ask you to redraw it and answer it in that state. Okay, so let's look at the answer again, just to make sure we clarify what we need to do there. So you name the challenge, you state which challenge is linked to that, or which environment is linked to it. So we can see the Vashni fashion designers employ fashion designers who are always late for work. People who are late for work is something that happens only inside the business. It's got nothing to do with the market and the macro environment of the business. So therefore that must be micro. And then you link the level of control, and it has to be full control. And again, we look at the verb that is used in the question. It says they state the extent of control. So it's that 1 mark, or not necessarily 1 mark, but it's a shorter answer for and you're going to get the marks for the fact. If they said explain the level of control, then you would have to have a sentence for that level of control saying the business has full control in this environment. Okay, so it's those small little things that you have to remember. Okay, all right, so that is Another example of a type of question where the mark allocation should guide you. And then we look at one more question where it says, explain the importance of quality in promoting the image of the business. And that action verb explain has been highlighted to you. So what that means is now, according to the list of verbs we gave you at the beginning, you're going to have a statement as well as a qualifier. And the 8 marks are going to guide you. If you divide the 8 by 2, because each statement and qualifier is worth 2 marks, if you divide the 8 divided by 2, you're going to get an answer of 4. So you need at least 4 correct bullet points. Now, this question doesn't tell you specifically explain 4 importances of quality in promoting the image of the business. It just says explain the importance. So you may write a little bit more if you are uncertain about your answers. Okay? So don't write too much. Let the mark allocation guide you. So if you see it's 8 marks, you know you have to have 4 statements with 4 qualifiers to get or 4 correct statements with 4 correct qualifiers to get the marks. And if you're uncertain about 1 or 2 of your answers, you may write a little bit extra to guarantee yourself, but don't write more than a 5th bullet point or so, because then again you're going to be exceeding what is required of you. Okay, and you can see the mark allocation here where it says it enables the business to have a good reputation. So that's your 1 mark. That's your statement that you are saying. And then if you put that question in, why does it enable the business to have a good reputation? Because it promotes brand awareness. Okay, so that is the qualifier to the statement. So you get 1 mark for saying enables the business to have a good reputation. Or how does it get a good reputation? Or why does it get a good reputation? Because it promotes brand awareness. Customers associate the image of the business. So there you're talking about the image of the business is your statement with the quality of the product. Okay, so there you are linking the image of the business to the quality, and you're saying that those 2 items are linked to each other. If you have good quality, your business gets a good image as well.
No, you can say actually customers associate the image of the business. They associate it with what? With the quality of the product.
With the quality of the
product.
product.
So what, why, when, how, so that, because, those kind of things will make good qualifiers.
Okay, then the 3rd bullet point there, quality products increase sales. Why? Because it attracts customers and attracts customers' interest and investors. Okay, so how does it increase sales? By attracting more customers and increasing in and the interest of investors. And the last one there, business gain goodwill support from who? From the community. So that how, what, when, why, that is going to be for your qualifier. But you can see a 1 mark for the statement and 1 mark for the qualifier. Okay, then we look at another example, the second last example we're looking at for section B. It says advise the business on how they can promote inclusivity in the workplace. 6 marks. So here you're given an advice or recommendation. Okay, and these are always going to be 2 marks at the end of the statement. So you only have to give 1 statement, 1 piece of advice to get the 2 marks. And again, if you look at the mark allocation, it says 6 marks. So if you divide that by 2, because it's 2 marks per statement you get, you need to have 3 correct statements or 3 correct pieces of advice in this case, or 3 recommendations in this case. And you can see there 3 statements have been made and the mark is allocated at the end. So here we're just looking at the essence of your statement, where we say respect and promote individual cultures in the workplace. So what you are saying is inclusivity promotes cultures, but you're putting it in a full sentence to make sure that you are getting the workplace. So the essence is that it promotes cultures or respects cultures. That's the essence we're looking for, but it is somewhere in your statement. You don't have to clarify it. You don't have to say why or how does it promote cultures, or how does it develop respect in the business. You can just say it does, in fact, or develop the respect and promote individual culture. So that's the advise part or recommend questions. We'll always have 2 marks attached to the end of it.
Sorry, Mr. de Klerk. Also, if you look at those sentences, guys, the first one says respect and promote individual cultures in the workplace. If it's advise, if you only said respect and promote individual cultures, that's a full sentence. Yeah. That would have been enough for 2 marks. If the question said explain, you had to say where. Yes. In the workplace, and that would have been your 2nd mark. So make sure that you guys know or distinguish between these different kinds of action verbs.
Okay. Right, and then the last thing we're going to look at is distinguish between management and leadership. And again, that verb distinguish means you're going to have a statement and a qualifier because the marks are going to be split. But I think we've explained that already. What is important here is we want to look at the question says distinguish between management and leadership. So here are two concepts that they want you to speak about. And you can see we've put it in the table. Why do we put it in the table? To make sure that the marker knows exactly what forms part of the management that you're discussing and what forms part of the leadership that you are discussing. Because if it's 8 marks, it's going to be 4 marks attached to management and 4 marks attached to leadership. So you're going to have enough information for that. But what's important here is we are encouraging you to ensure that whenever you are asked to distinguish between two concepts, that you make sure that you put it in the table just to make it easier for the marker to go through. Okay, grade 10s, that is section A and section B. We have 5 minutes or so to look at section C, the essay questions. Do you want to quickly take us through just the basics of the essay to remind them about the introduction, the body, and the conclusion?
Right. Grade 10s, this is also one other part where you guys often struggle is with the layout of an essay question. An essay question actually has a lot of marks to offer, and you don't even need to get all of these marks. But where you lose marks, where you shouldn't, is at the technical layout. Okay, now guys, an essay question has the following layout. It has an introduction, and that word introduction must be there so that the marker can know that this is the introduction to your essay. Then there's a body with a heading and subheadings. Now guys, you can see I've got an example of a question there, and you will see there's a leading statement. And under that leading statement is the question, and that question normally has 4 parts to it. And those 4 parts are in bullet point form. Now guys, you can see that all of those parts that's in bullet point form must form part of the body. The first bullet point is not the introduction, and the last one the conclusion. All of that is the body. You guys need to make sure that you get this right. Okay, now guys, and when I say you need to have headings and subheadings, you can use that question as your heading. And sometimes that question has little headings as well, and then you use that as your subheadings. But you use the questions to structure your answer properly. If you only write down the questions as headings, you already get 1 A mark, which stands for analysis. Now, Mr. de Klerk, since we've got very little time, maybe we should take them through the lasso part. Now, guys, in a business studies essay, the marks are always 40. That's not 40 for facts only. The maximum number that you can get, the maximum marks that you can get for facts only is 32 out of 40. The rest of the marks is made up of some technical details. Now, if you go to your slide, you will see the technical details look like this. The L mark is if you've written down the word introduction, that's 1 L, and there's something written underneath your introduction. That's already 1 mark, which is in the form of an L. And also when you wrote down the word conclusion and you've written something underneath that, that is your second L mark. So there's already 2 marks out of your 40.
Just important there, grade 10s, make sure that you may not use anything that's in the leading statement.
No.
Okay? It needs to be something underneath the introduction and conclusion, but it cannot be anything that is taken from the actual statement that's given to you.
Mr. de Klerk, I just want to mention here as well, if you cannot figure out an introduction, guys, that's only 2 marks out of the 32 that you need to get, and you can make the 32 up somewhere in the body.
Essay, yeah.
If you don't know, you can write anything as long as there's something written underneath introduction so that you can get your L mark. And then if you have to quote it from the leading case study, do that. You're not going to get marks for it, but you're going to get the L marks for the introduction and the conclusion. Right, I'm quickly going to go through with the A marks. Now guys, A stands for analysis, and it's written in the following, or awarded in the following way. If you've spoken about all 4 of those subheadings in the question itself, those bullet points, if all 4 of them were addressed in the body, you will receive 1 A mark. Even if you've only written down the question, the heading. If you've done that 4 times, you will get 1 mark for A. That's free and mahala. The second A mark is awarded if you scored more than 16 for your facts. Then the second A mark is awarded. Okay, now the next one is S. Now we will assume that you start off with both your S's. Right, that stands for structure and synthesis. Now guys, the 1S may be taken away from you if you've written something irrelevant. It is not wrong, but it's gibberish, it makes no sense, and therefore a marker may take away 1S. So you will lose a mark. Right, the second S you will lose if you have attempted less than 50% of the question. So there's 4 bullet points there, you've only attempted one of those bullet points. Now guys, and the next one is originality. And guys, originality basically means you need to have 2 examples to clarify a statement that you've made somewhere in the body, but it must be recent and it must be
a real life example.
And it must be a real life example from the news. So there we have it, guys. It looks like we have run out of time officially.
Yeah, great, Tens. Thank you for joining us, and I hope that we've given you some valuable and useful information and tips to prepare well for the examination. And from Mr. Van Sail and myself, I would like to wish you good luck for your final assessment, and have a good afternoon further. Bye-bye.
Good luck. Bye-bye, great ends.